as you guys are probably aware, last week Heart of Thorns at E3 went on pre-purchase for $50. Now, for new players who are getting the base game with it for free, that's a pretty incredible deal. It's a steal. But today, what I really want to talk about is what exactly are we getting in the expansion? We now know what it's priced at. Let's see what is in Heart of Thorns. Heart of Thorns in a nutshell, and modern Guild Wars 2 while we're at it. I'm going to be covering several months worth of information here, so there's not going to be tons of links in the description, but if you do decide to get the game, there'll at least be one to that and a few other things down there too. So, let's get started. So, the first thing to talk about are the elite specializations. Most of the news that's been coming out have really revolved around these. These are new ways to play the currently existing 8 professions in Guild Wars 2, and the new one they'll be adding also. What Arenanet have done is they have looked at their engine technology, the way that they can create skills, expanded on it, added a whole bunch of new capabilities, and then they have allowed players who buy Heart of Thorns to unlock an elite specialization that can change the way you play. Each elite specialization comes with new profession mechanics, comes with a new weapon, new trait line, and a whole bunch of new utilities too. These are the ones that have been announced so far. First of all, we had the Chronomancer. This is who Mesmers will be able to elite specialize into. This is just the first of many elite specializations to come. The Chronomancer was an unreleased Guild Wars 1 profession that we never actually got to play, and it's essentially a time mage. Mesmers get access to a whole bunch of new skills that are like giant clocks they can drop on the floor. They're technically wells, and they have the ability to travel through time. You can split yourself from the current timeline, use a whole bunch of skills, run to a completely remote location, even die, and then after a short while you'll return to where you once were. Travel back in time. All of your skill cooldowns will return to what they were. You'll come back to life if you were in downstate, and you'll be back where you were originally stood, allowing for some pretty mental combos. Last of all, the Chronomancer will give the Mesmer the ability to wield the shield, which has more time-themed abilities. Next one that was revealed was the Dragon Hunter. Now, the name of this one wasn't taken too well by the community in general. I suppose some people liked it. This is the Guardian Elite Specialization. This allows Guardians to do like crazy ranged damage with longbows and gives them access to a whole bunch of like magical traps that have very pronounced, varying effects, rather different to what we'd already seen on the Thief and the Ranger in terms of traps at launch of the game. The Dragon Hunter has different F abilities, including the ability to fly a short distance and land somewhere with wings, throw spears at people from range, or summon a shield that their allies can cower behind. Very much seems to have been inspired by the Paragon of Guild Wars 1. The third announced elite specialization was the Reaper. This is the Necromancer elite specialization, very much inspired by Pyramid Head and very dangerous, slow-moving horror movie monsters. The Necromancer will get access to a really powerful cleaving melee weapon, the Greatsword. They get access to a full complement of shrieks and shouts that they can scream at people who actually do damage to enemies. And they have a new shroud. Instead of Death Shroud with all of its typical abilities, Reapers will have a new shroud that turns them into a giant, well, Grim Reaper. You have a huge scythe, you get a completely different set of abilities, including a massive Executioner's Strike on the skill 5 that just looks completely bonkers to play. Those are the 3 that we've had the most information about. However, through other means, we have learned a little bit about some others. We know, for example, from PAX South that the Ranger will be becoming a Druid, who is very kind of nature-inclined and gets to wield the staff. We know that the Elementalist will become the Tempest, though we know very little more than that. And we know at least that the Engineer will be getting access to the Hammer as a weapon, and will also get a bunch of drone abilities, as you can see here from the initial launch trailer. So, that's what's happening with all the existing classes, and after Heart of Thorns comes out, they're going to keep dropping elite specializations into the game, a little bit in my opinion to how new champions are dropped into MOBA games, though the comparison may not hold up in all regards. The next big feature of Heart of Thorns is not just elite specializations, but a new profession entirely. So this is the 9th and final profession coming to Guild Wars 2. This is the Revenant. This is the long waited for 3rd heavy armor class, and the theme of this class is that it is a Mists communer, much like the Ritualists from the first game, who can channel various heroes of the past to kind of ride shotgun with them. So they've got this weird multiple personality thing going on. Their weapons that we know they can use already are the the staff, which is a melee weapon, currently we don't have in the game. They have the hammer, which is going to be a ranged weapon, and they have mace main hand with axe offhand as combos. Probably more weapons will be revealed soon, including swords, as it seems from a previous stream. Now, the key feature of the Revenant is this idea of channeling previous heroes. The heroes announced so far are Ventari, who is an incredibly supportive hero that provides lots of ways to cleanse and heal your allies. There is Malix the Unyielding, previously a very deadly boss from the first game, who you can now kind of ride ally with and will provide you with lots of condition power. And then there is King Jarlis Ironhammer, another huge character from the first game, who is an tanky defensive toon. With Jarlis comes the ability to taunt foes and a variety of other effects we'll talk about shortly in the video. In addition to those guys, through data mining, significant speculation, it seems very much that 2 additional legends will be available for the Revenant 2, one being Shiro Togachi, final boss and assassin of the Factions campaign from the first game, and Glint, a dragon character who will probably be quite huge for this expansion storyline, which I'll talk about very shortly. Not only this, but the Revenant will also have its own elite specialization as the other professions get, so it will be further augmented and changed when that is revealed too, but so far, no word on it. In addition to a new profession, Heart of Thorns is also giving us a new crafting discipline. This is the Scribe. The Scribe isn't much like the other crafting disciplines. It's quite selfless. It doesn't give much to you. It's designed specifically to interact with the new guild system that's coming into the game and the guild halls, but generally they create blueprints and schematics for war and for decorations and upgrades to guild halls, which we'll talk about very soon. So, those are the changes to the classes, the new discipline coming to the game. Next big feature is masteries. Now, obviously there's this question when you release an expansion to an MMO, are we getting an increased level cap? Guild Wars as a franchise has always tried to break convention when it comes to grinding for more levels, grinding for more power. The first game had a level cap of 20 that was designed to be reached very easily and very early, and they have agreed to do that for Guild Wars 2 as well. So there will be no level cap raise, but they are going to address end game progression with this new system called Masteries. In addition to there being no level cap raise, they're never going to add any more tiers of gear either. So if you have Ascended gear, that's it, that's pretty much perfect for you, and they're not going to be increasing us statistically combat-wise. Masteries will allow you to hone your character in other ways, such as gliding. Once you hit level 80 now, as you continue to gain experience and try to level your toon, you can learn specific abilities like gliding throughout the jungle. So gliding will be a huge thing of this expansion, and as you get more experience and understand more, you'll unlock new things to do with your glider, be able to glide for longer and various other perks. Gliding isn't the only thing. You'll be able to learn about ancient languages, you'll be able to speak with various alien cultures you'll meet in the jungle, you'll learn how to identify mushrooms in the area that you'll then be able to eat and give you speed boosts or allow you to leap to areas you previously couldn't go to. They're explaining that the new mastery system will kind of create a Metroidvania feel for the MMO, and as new updates come out, they'll continue adding more masteries, more places for us to hone our characters. This is the end game progression. In most MMOs, you look at a character name and then you look at what level that person is. Once the expansion Heart of Thorn comes out, you'll be looking at the name of someone and then you'll see how many mastery points they've got. This will actually be replacing the level that you have to be displayed to everyone around the world. So this really is kind of, instead of leveling up, we get our masteries. There are even masteries confirmed for things like Fractals of the Mists, which hopefully will improve that area of the game because it sorely needs it, but no word on exactly how just yet, and that's got some of us worried. Speaking of fractals, next big thing that has been said to be coming with Heart of Thorns is hardcore endgame content. One of the biggest criticisms of Guild Wars 2 throughout its entire life is that it's an incredibly casual game that really doesn't have very much difficult to do on the PvE side of things. So they're trying to address this in multiple ways. Number one, the generic experience of exploring the expansion will be more engaging, more difficult. Devs actually now have the capability of doing a lot of new things. They completely rewrote the way that AI works in the game, allowing them to have massive encounters with like up to 300 different entities fighting all at once. And then there are new combat effects in as well. Defiance was an old system of preventing bosses from being CC'd and kind of removed a whole facet of gameplay for PvE. These are now being replaced with break bars, which encourage players to spike CCs on foes and will actually encourage more coordinated play. And even the ability to taunt foes is now going to be a thing, so there should be a lot more to the game than just LOSing things in corners and actually using conditions and CCing and engaging in a lot more of what Guild Wars 2's combat has got to offer. All of that said, they haven't actually announced to us yet the big hardcore feature that is supposedly coming with Heart of Thorns. The generic gameplay does sound like it's going to be a lot more engaging, but what are they adding? We still don't know. There was a very recent post from one of the devs on the forums on this topic, and they are simply not ready to talk to us about it. Is it going to be something more akin to traditional MMO raiding? Are they looking more at the way they're doing 5-man dungeon content? Well, that is still up in the air, and probably one of the biggest things most of us in the community are still waiting on. In the spirit of talking about endgame style things, there are at least things for us to go for in Heart of Thorns, whether the content itself is hard or not. There is a big overhaul coming to the legendary acquisition process, and a whole bunch of new legendary weapons. So at launch we had 1 legendary weapon for every weapon type except great swords, which got 3. There's going to be a full new set of legendaries coming with Heart of Thorns, so you'll be able to pick from a Generation 1 legendary or a Generation 2 legendary. And precursor crafting is coming to the game, so you'll no longer have to rely on spending massive amounts of money on the trading post or very, very low RNG in the Mystic Forge to acquire your precursor. There will now be long storied collections filled with tasks for you to complete to actually create not just a precursor, but like a pre-precursor and a pre-pre-precursor to slowly build your weapon up and eventually have your legendary. They also confirmed that the new legendaries will not be crafted in the same way as the old ones and will probably use something very similar to the precursor crafting system for themselves. Next, let's talk about guild halls. This was the thing that Arenanet chose to announce the price of the game with, and indeed it's a huge feature. Guild halls was something we had in the first game. They looked at the concept from the first game and decided when they were adding it to the second, they were going to go above and beyond. I've spent hours talking about guild halls just this week. There are tons of posts, but surmise, this is the opportunity for guilds to embark on a big mission to capture a guild hall for themselves from minions of Mordramoth, the enemy dragon, the big bad boss of the expansion. And then once you have captured that, you actually have the opportunity to build it up for yourself. There are various structures within whichever hall you choose for your own to then develop. So there's a mine you can create, there is a marketplace you can create, there is a workshop you can create, and a lot more. Even once through massive effort you've got all of this stuff built up, there will be the opportunity to decorate your guild hall, much like other MMOs offer with their player housing systems. A lot of people wanted player housing for Guild Wars 2. This isn't quite that, but you'll be able to decorate it. You'll be able to place fountains and plant pots and carpets and all kinds of stuff that I'm sure will be expanded upon as time goes by to make that guild hall very specific to you and your friends. There are global changes coming to guilds also. There's essentially alliance chat coming into the game. This is the ability to talk to any of your 5 guilds, even when you're not repping them. So there'll be like a new chat option to be able to do that. And lastly, the guild halls, probably the thing I'm most excited about, will give you the opportunity to build an arena, which allows you to essentially duel people. Dueling is something many people have wanted in Guild Wars 2. Dueling will be coming within guild halls, just as we had in the first game. There's an opportunity to fight one another using PvE balance without having to worry about world versus world, or you can stage giant brawls and skirmishes there in ways that we couldn't in Heart of the Mists. You can have up to 30 people, it sounds like so far, all going for a massive free-for-all, or you can set people to the red team, the blue team, the green team, the yellow team, or much more. And even better, certain players who have the permission can drop decorations and things that will impact the arena while fights are going on. So if you like, you can drop fear turrets or heal turrets, or you can toggle on holes in the arena floor that people might be able to fall through. You can build mazes and basically create unique game types for yourself, a bit like in my old Halo 2 days. Okay, it's probably going to be a bit more limited than that, but it's a really good start. Alright, so let's talk about the new areas we'll be able to explore. Let's talk about the Maguma Jungle. Now for me, this is where I think that the expansion will disappoint people the most. When I think of a Guild Wars 2 expansion, I was expecting something like the first game where we'd get a whole new continent to explore. That's not what we're getting. We are getting just the Maguma Jungle. Now even though it's one region, this can in theory fill in the entire western side of the map and be made up of many PvE explorable maps. We don't have a final number on how many maps are being added. However, no matter how many maps we do get added for Heart of Thorns, and hopefully that's a substantial amount, each map is said to be about 3 times as dense as previous maps were at the launch of the game. See, maps now have a lot of verticality built into them. Anywhere you tread in the Maguma Jungle, you can be pretty content to know that somewhere deep below, underground, there is a whole other biome of content, or miles above you in the treetops, there again is another biome. So there's like 3 levels to all maps. There's the canopy, there's the core, and then there's the jungle roots, which means that any maps they add actually have a whole lot more to do in them than any of the previous maps did that were just kind of big open fields. Now, don't get too bought into the marketing speechy style stuff here. I highly doubt that we're going to get an entire biome below and above us that spans the entire map. But what we have seen so far from the betas, it does look fairly substantial. You can constantly see areas below you that you could, in theory, drop down to, or areas high above. But take it with a grain of salt, that's all I'm saying. My main worry is that there's not going to be too much extra map space to explore, and that saddens me. The new maps as well will have a new system on them called Outposts. Outposts are large areas where you can be sure there are tons of events going on. Kind of replaces the Heart Quest system from the initial game, but much further refined. And the new maps as well will have kind of global meta events. The map we've explored so far from betas is Verdant Brink, and this deals with the day-night cycle and preparing for the long, scary night when tons of dragon minions come out and get incredibly aggressive across the entire map, seeing whether you can survive. There'll be unique rewards in each map, just like we saw with Silver Waste and the Dry Top, the 2 free maps added from Living World Season 2, as well as all the other stuff you would come to expect from a Guild Wars 2 map. So, that's the jungle, that's where we'll be exploring. The storyline. I want to talk a little bit about the expansion storyline. This is quite important to me. We will be fighting another Elder Dragon, Morgemoth. So when Guild Wars 2 first came out, it was all about fighting Zaitan. This is now about fighting a second Elder Dragon, the one of plants and growth. The characters we'll be interacting with are the various members of Destiny's Edge, as well as all the new characters that were introduced in Living World Season 1 and 2. And it seems to me, at the very least, that the tone of the story is a little bit darker. They have set up that the Sylvari, whose true purpose are basically to be minions of the dragon we're trying to kill, are not to be trusted. So there's a lot of elements of Sylvari racism and interesting dynamics there. People who are playing Sylvari characters are supposedly going to get a much different, kind of improved, more fun experience going through the expansion, though it's unclear whether this is just through context of the narrative or that there's actually going to be story changes, so be aware with that one. And there are various quality of life improvements to the story too. The player character now speaks. This makes a huge difference, makes it far more engaging and fun to follow. There are no more annoying side-by-side cinematics that plagued the initial personal story and really held it back. And the content as well, not beyond just the Elder Dragon. It is said that this story deals with some legacy left by Glint right at the end of Guild Wars 1, which gets a lot of us lore heads quite excited, and we're seeing a lot of new interesting things happen too. There are mounted enemies in the expansion. We're seeing hints of one of the franchise's favourite villains, the Massart, coming back. We're seeing giant new tribes of frog people like the Nuhok and the Itzul. We're seeing hints of massive golden ancient cities that we'd never seen before. In addition to this, they did say that you need to own Heart of Thorns to participate in the next Living World seasons. Living World Season 3, Living World possibly even Season 4 beyond that, are kind of continuing from the expansion storyline, will take place in expansion areas, and it's locked off for expansion owners. One last thing that will be featured in the new jungle maps we're getting access to are adventures. Adventures are new challenges placed throughout the world that will have leaderboards and allow players in PvE to be kind of competitive about. So one adventure we saw was you had to drop into this giant pit filled with jungle tendrils and collect as many pieces of rubble as you possibly could. With the adventure system, They're adding a lot more leaderboard visibility to Guild Wars 2, and they are saying that they're bringing back a bunch of activities we haven't heard about for a long time. Before the game came out, there was word of things like archery shootouts and basket brawl. Adventures could well finally see us playing those as well. So that's PvE, but make no mistake, the other two game types do have some love for themselves too. Over on the tournament PvP side of things, they are adding a new game type. This is Stronghold. Stronghold is based on Guild Wars 1's much-loved GVG, and could prove to be a much more fun game type than Conquest, which is what most PvPers have been stuck with for a long time. And in addition to the new game type, there will now be the option for guilds to form teams, and you'll be able to have your own team name, a team captain, and there'll be leaderboards specifically for teams. So right now, players are only given a rating based on their solo victories. Well, now you can team up with a bunch of people, and these could be the metrics that are used to get you into the World Tournament Series and so forth in the future. Over for World vs. World, they're having a huge change in the way of one of the maps they're playing on. The Alpine Borderlands is now being removed and replaced with the Desert Borderlands. The Desert Borderlands is a huge new map that borrows a lot of elements from Age of the Mists and other things Arenanet have learned. It has a giant central mechanic that involves nuke that does incredible damage to all objectives on the map. Every single keep has a various theme. There's a fire keep deep underground, there's an air keep high up in the cliffs, and there's an earth keep surrounded by a sandstorm. And each keep, in addition to having its various towers and objectives we all know and love from World vs. World, has 3 shrines associated with it. And owning these shrines changes the battlefield in various ways. The earth keep has a shrine, for example, that allows players to be stealthed when walking through this defensive sandstorm. The air keep can make players who own its shrines invulnerable to fall damage, which is very fitting considering how high some of those areas in the air keep are. The fire keep can allow players to turn into giant hounds of Balthazar that blow people up, and much more. The new Borderlands is just freaking massive and has a ton of stuff going on. In addition to that, there will be rebalances to the World vs. World experience ability trees they've described. There is new siege coming to the game in the way of the shield generator, which is kind of like a defensive siege. And lastly, the new guild system allows guilds to claim objectives and upgrade them in a variety of ways themselves. So in Eternal Battlegrounds, you'll be able to call in an airstrike that blows up Stone Mist Castle, or you'll be able to upgrade your towers to reveal enemies on the minimap, giving a lot of incentive for guilds to capture locations, claim them as their own, and really build them up instead of just running in circles in giant K trains. And there you go, that's pretty much Heart of Thorns in a nutshell. Those are all the big core features. I do think I'd be remiss to not mention some changes to the base game as well. Now these, obviously you don't have to buy the expansion for, but they're big changes to Guild Wars 2 in my opinion, recent ones. I'm not going to go over like a whole year of patch notes, but we are looking out for the fact that the personal story for the base game is being restored, is being revoiced in certain areas. A bunch of stuff that was removed is actually being added back in and improved. They're adding the ability, for example, to explore Old Lion's Arch before it was destroyed by Scarlet Briar back into the game. Just for some clarity, those changes have actually already been dropped in the game in a massive patch that came out, probably the biggest patch of the year, just a few days ago. In addition, they have completely changed the way that builds are made, the trait system. We've moved over to the specialization system, and with that have come big changes to the way we level up and unlock stuff, the way that the personal story rewards us. In fact, there was a quote from a dev just today saying that a lot of the balance for the rewards we get as we level have been changed to make it more exciting. And in addition, with the specialization change, there have been changes to the way conditions work too. Conditions now no longer cap at 25, or the damaging ones, they cap at 1,500, which you'll probably never see. So condition damage is far more viable and isn't gimped for no reason whatsoever. The effect of confusion's been changed. We've had quickness turned into a boon. We've got a new boon in the game called resistance. We've got taunt coming into the game. Another big base change many of us are excited about is the ability to swap the stats on our ascended weapons and armor fairly cheaply in the Mystic Forge, which is a huge quality of life change and adds way more incentive to run Fractals of the Mists. And lastly, all of the PvE maps around the game, once Heart of Thorns is out, will have a new map bonus material system that gives you T6 mats and special things specifically for doing events in that map, so you can actually go out there in the world and look for specific things rather than just running dungeons all the time and buying what you need. A little while back we had big changes to the camera, introduction of first person camera, stuff like that, but that's probably out the scope of the video. there you go, guys. That's Heart of Thorns in a nutshell. That's what your $50 gets you. I have been saying this week, you know, what we should really be discussing is not what we think we're entitled to, because new players get the base game for free for just 50, and they get like this incredible deal. What we should be discussing is Heart of Thorns, what we know about it so far. This is just the stuff they have announced so far. Is it worth the $50 or not? And maybe this video will help you make that decision for yourself. Again, there is a link in the description if you guys want to use it. This has been an incredible amount of effort to edit through, but hopefully it was worth it. Yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think. Did I miss anything? I hope not, but check out the comments, and I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow.